Great. So hi, everybody. Welcome to the Thrive PhD webinar. I'm so excited to have those of you who are joining us live, and then also anybody who will be joining us virtually via the recording. Just a heads up, I have done my best to kind of soundproof this room, but there is a crazy summer thunderstorm raging outside. So fingers crossed that our electricity holds and that we are able to stay connected. Otherwise, we'll figure something out if that happens. But I'm so excited to share this content. It's one of the things that as a coach and a PhD student, I didn't realize that I was employing any special techniques, but eventually developed a whole set of coping skills around developing priorities and setting to-do lists for myself because I have a chronic illness. So I have endometriosis, which is a chronic illness that is tied to my hormonal cycles. So I have some amount of predictive ability in terms of when it will be bad and when it won't, but I also get blindsided by flares. But even if I didn't have a chronic illness, my PhD life and also my life as a human on this earth is never as straightforward as I feel like it can be or it should be. So I don't know about you, but I have the experience of often setting up a variety of plans for myself, making a schedule, only to have that schedule completely torn apart by noon on Monday. So this is my way of coping with that. It's my strategies for how to decide what I'm going to do every day. This is the kind of like finite, minute-by-minute decision making. So I'm really excited to share some of these things with you. If you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat channel. I'm also open to taking any questions on Twitter or via email. There's a whole slide of ways to connect with me at the end as well. So this this program is for you if you have all of the work to do and also nothing to do. If you've ever sat down and been like, I have no idea what I should be doing right now. This webinar is for you if you've ever sat down and not had a clear idea about what you should start with or what the most important thing is. This is for you if you have a habit of starting all of the things and finishing none of the things. That would be me. Or if you're a person that's working really consistently, you're putting in the hours, you're sitting down at your desk, but you also feel like nothing's getting done. You feel like there's progress, but it's maybe not as focused as you want it. It's maybe all over the place. This webinar is for you. So some of the things that we're going to go through today, building on your goals to figure out what you should or could be doing. We're going to talk about a startup routine, so where I think your to-do list should fit in your day. We're going to talk about priorities, which is one of those deceptively simple ideas that actually in practice is really hard to figure out. I'm going to walk you through a couple of different types of to-do lists and the pros and cons for each. And then I'm also going to share my active today's to-do list for you. So get ready for that peek into my routine. We're going to talk a little bit about how to adjust to unexpected circumstances, how you can use your to-do list to help you and figure out what to do in the process of adjusting to things you didn't know about ahead of time. We're going to do a little bit on how to use small chunks of time. This is a question I get all the time on Twitter, and I'm really happy to kind of address it here. And then to wind down, we're going to talk about how fitting shutdown routines. So ways to balance your desire to get out of your desk and out of your office at the end of the day, but also setting yourself up for success the next time you are there. Briefly, we'll talk about ways to stay connected after this webinar and in the future, and then I'll be taking any questions. So, making to-do lists is an important part of the process, but it is part of the process. So if you're watching this recording on any other day except for August 15th, this is the last part in a 4-part series that I've called Set the Course. So all of this work builds on each other. And by all of this work, I mean setting big goals, determining what you're going to do on any given year, any quarter, any multi-year program, setting up milestones, knowing where you are in the progress to any certain goal, and then also just the day-to-day. But if there's any doubt or confusion or muddiness in any of those steps, it's really hard to know what you're going to do. So if you don't know what your long-term goals are, if you don't know what your personal goals are, what your professional goals are, what you should be working on, it's really hard to know what you should do on a day-to-day basis. So if you are still feeling a little bit of confusion about what you're ultimately working for, please check out the first 3 days of this course. But if you know what your goals are and now you're just here to figure out what you should do on this random Thursday, then the rest of this is for you. So, when to make the to-do list? This is another one of those questions that I think is really deceptively difficult. So, when will you check in with yourself and decide what you need to do on any day? Will you decide that in the mornings when you sit down? Is it something that you do every month? So I really encourage all of my clients in the Thrive PhD community, people I'm working with one-on-one, to make evaluation part of the regular routine. So evaluation is one of those words that sounds really scary. You know, when you have to do your year evaluation for your PhD program, or you have to do kind of a term evaluation or your teaching evaluations. But the more that you check in with yourself, and it doesn't have to be complex and it doesn't have to be elaborate, but the more you check in and see how things are going, the more that you can kind of disassociate the idea of evaluation with grading. So by evaluation, I simply mean just checking in and saying what parts of this are working and what parts of it aren't. So if you're looking for questions to use as part of your evaluation, I had some really good ones yesterday in the email, but making it part of your regular routine. So I sit down on the last day of every month and check all of my goals for the year. And sometimes I say, oh, well, I didn't do anything on this goal. And sometimes I really crushed it and I did it early. But having that day where I just know that on the last day of every month, this is something that I do, really has helped me build that into my routine in a way that wasn't tied to the semester or the quarter, because the end of September will come at the end of September. It doesn't matter if your term has just started or just ended. I also check in every sprint to see, you know, which one of my goals I have made progress on, what things need to be carried over, what support I might need. I check in weekly to kind of determine what resources and things I need to focus on. But I think the most powerful check-in that I do is daily. And the way that it really looks in practice is making my to-do list. So the benefits of a startup routine are amazing. Brains thrive on routine, especially brains that are navigating complexity for any reason. So if you have a schedule that's all over the place, if you have 6 different jobs, if you are adjuncting on 4 different campuses, if you have a dissertation process and a PI project that you're working on and a side paper and a side gig, having a startup routine is really powerful. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be mystical. It doesn't have to be special. It can be as short as 5 minutes. So we'll also talk about shutdown routines at the end of this webinar. But the startup routine is basically just a couple of minutes to pause and make sure that you're purposefully working on things. I don't know about you, but in the beginning of my grad school routine, my startup routine was open up email and then deal with whatever was in there. And so sometimes that was teaching and sometimes that was my advisor wanting to know what things were. But it always meant that the first thing I did was look to see what other people wanted from me and then started with that stuff first, which meant that I was really good about keeping my inbox clean, but I was really bad at working on the long-term projects that didn't have the kind of immediacy. So some of the elements of your startup routine might be checking to make sure that you have what you need. Do you have your computer? Do you have all of your lab materials? Do you have your notebook? Do you have your phone? Anything that you need. Deciding what task you're going to start with. Thinking about what things you have to watch out for. So if you know that you have, say, a doctor's appointment at 2:30 that you're likely to miss, maybe setting a phone reminder. A big part of my startup routine is deciding what I'm going to eat and when I'm going to be done for the day, because I'm 100% likely to forget eating lunch if I don't stop and put a reminder in my calendar to quit and take a break and eat some food. And then thinking about what is your overall goal and then what's your stretch goal. So I often identify the most important thing that I'm going to be doing that day. And then if I get that thing done, it's like an instant win. Sometimes I develop a stretch goal, just like those old Kickstarter routines, where this is the goal that I need to meet minimum, and then this is the thing that if I did it, it would be amazing. So identifying those three things, I know a lot of people powerfully identify the three most important tasks of the day, and that's definitely something that I recommend as well. Which brings us to knowing what the priority even is. So priorities are really hard when you're balancing projects that are both self-directed, like a dissertation, and then also collaborative or have some sort of outside accountability. So say, for example, you're teaching, like many people do during their PhD program. You have your dissertation research, which is really important. If you don't finish your dissertation research, you might not get funding for the next semester, or you might not pass your prospectus, or you might not be able to continue in the program. But it's not urgent in the same way that a student who really needs you to meet with them in office hours so that they don't fail the test is urgent. So the test is on a certain day, your office hours are at a certain time. Of course, the urgent thing is going to take priority over the research goal, which is really important, but doesn't have this sort of time-based element. And so the first thing to kind of check in with yourself are what things are important and urgent, what things are just urgent, and what things are important and you really want to make time for them. One of the questions that I ask myself is this on fire? So by that I mean, is this thing actively in a state where it needs my attention right now? So sometimes there are to-dos that carry over, and on Monday it's important, but on Thursday it's urgent. So identifying which one of those things is on fire and really needs your attention, or it could be soon, is a really important question. And then asking yourself, is this my priority? So sometimes my advisor would email me with things and say, I really need you to write up this letter, it's due tomorrow. Or I really need you to come in and meet with me about this question for your teaching. I'm available at 2 p.m. And sometimes those things were not my priority. So there's a saying that says other people's lack of planning does not make your emergency. And that can be really true, especially with students. So sometimes a student will say, I completely forgot, I didn't prep for this thing, I really need for you to meet me, the test is tomorrow. So that's an example of somebody else's priority that might not be your priority, especially if Tuesday, for the day that the student wants to meet, is a day where you were planning to be off campus and be with your thesis research. So thinking about whose priority it really is important. And sometimes other people's priorities surpass yours, but sometimes they don't need to. Another good question, are other people impacted if this is not finished? So if I don't finish my grading in time for my students to get enough space to process the feedback before the next assignment, they're absolutely impacted by me not finishing that grading. Other people are less impacted if I don't finish reading the book that I need to read for my thesis prospectus that's due in 3 months. So I often prioritize tasks that other people are going to be impacted if it's not finished. It's one of the things that makes it a higher priority rather than a lower one. One question that I had to get in the habit of asking myself was, will my future self be greatly impacted if this does not go to plan? So, for example, if you have a plan to read one book or one chapter every week to prep for your exams, and you miss 1 week of that reading schedule, your future self won't probably be too impacted if that 1 week doesn't really go to plan. But if you miss 6 weeks and then all of a sudden you have to find 6 weeks of time to catch back up in your reading schedule, your future self will definitely be impacted by that. So thinking about not only the consequences of not doing it today, but what will happen if it gets pushed is an important kind of part of the calculus. And then, do you have some flexibility? So if you're working on a journal article for a special edition issue that has a very definite go to print date, you might not have the same flexibility that you could have with a collaboration paper that you're working on that could go to this conference, but also could go to another conference in 6 months. So identifying which things are flexible can be really useful in knowing which things you can kind of put ahead in the ranking. All right, so now you have a sense kind of what things are the priority or what your priorities are. It's hardly ever a singular thing. And then how do you keep track of what is the priority? Most of the time, the natural way to keep track of things is to put due dates on them. It's what worked for many of us in school. It's probably what works for you now. If you have your dissertation prospectus is due on September 15th, that's a very clear marker as we get closer to September 15th about how much of a priority it is. Sometimes it can be really effective to give yourself due dates that aren't really external, they're just internal. So always knowing that this course wants to be released on September 15th, or you want this done by Friday, or you want this done by the end of the sprint if you're working kind of an agile model. So dates is usually the easiest and the most important, but it also is one of the things that it can be easier to fudge. So if it's your internal deadline, it's very easy to say, well, what's the big deal if I don't get this done on Tuesday? I set that deadline. I can remake that deadline as Thursday or next Tuesday if I need to. So external due dates are really helpful. Internal ones require a bit of discipline to kind of keep them in line. Another way to keep track of the priority items is to separate things out by project. So I keep my master to-do list in a program called Todoist, and I'll link to that in the show notes. But I have all of my separate projects listed out, and I put to-dos in the project that they belong to so that I can, on any one day, see what things are due, what things have open tickets, what things need to be focused on. And this really helps me because I'm very likely to lose motivation and focus if I switch between too many different projects during the day. And so if I know that I am really making progress on, say, releasing a course, I might stay in that project just to stay in that headspace and do 3 or 4 or 5 to-dos all in a day. But being able to separate things out by project can be really helpful, especially if it helps you to focus on one area at a time. Thinking about your roles can be really useful too. So is this part of my role as my side gig? Is this part of my role as this professor? Is this part of me as a teacher? Is this part of me as an RA? And working through all the to-dos in one category. I also tend to keep track of priorities around days of the week. So for me, Thursday is my admin day. I get a lot of my prep done for the next week on Thursdays. And so that means getting emails ready to send out. It means writing tweets. But I know on Thursday, my priority is future-facing items. But in the reality, what's probably going to work for you is a combination of all of these things. So it's worth thinking about what to-do systems or what to-do list management programs can I use that lets me see things in different ways, that I can pull up, okay, what's everything that's due today? What's everything that's overdue? What are all of the to-do lists in this project or that project? So that you have a multitude of ways to view your list. Okay. There are 3 major systems for developing to-do lists. And 2 of them are pretty related, and 3 is one that I'm going to push as, I think, a really helpful tool. But the first one is just the never-ending scroll of a to-do list, where you have a notebook, you have a Post-it note. It probably doesn't fit on a Post-it note, let's be real. But maybe it's a notebook, maybe it's in your iPhone, maybe it's just in the Keep app, but you keep adding to the list. So the list can be 3 or 4 pages long, and maybe you start a new list when the old list gets frustrated, but you just put it all in one list. Doesn't matter what project, doesn't matter what it's due. It's all in that place. So the benefits of that are that it's just in one place. You always know where it is. You never lose things, theoretically, unless you lose the whole list. But it can be really, really demoralizing to pull up a list of 200 open to-dos. I have had that list. I have ignored that list because who wants to work on item 6 of a 200 to-do list? So a good compromise is having a master list where you keep all 200 of those things, but then also pulling things out for a daily list. So maybe you have a master to-do list in your phone of everything that you need to do. And then you do pull out a Post-it note and say, okay, what are the 4 things that I really need to do today, or the 6 things, so that you can get the satisfaction of crossing everything off your to-do list, while also recognizing that there probably will not be a state in the next 2 or 3 years where you cross literally everything off your to-do list, at least not in any one project or in your whole life. The combination for these is the ABC list. So I am going to introduce this to you, and this is actually the list that I use every single day. I made one for every day of my dissertation. This was introduced to me as a way of organizing my to-do list in a reduction of dissertation stress therapy group that I met in my 2nd year. This was really practical, and honestly, it really helped me focus. And here is kind of the theory behind it. So the ABC list has 3 columns. There's the A column, which is everything that needs to be done today, or there will be dire and immediate consequences. So the trick with the A column is not everything gets to go in the A column. You have to be pretty ruthless about what goes in there. And sometimes you can limit it, and sometimes that list is longer, but being really clear about these things absolutely need to happen today, or there will be dire and immediate consequences, is really important. The B list tends to be the list that's, for me, gets kind of out of control. So these are all of the things that it would be really, really awesome if you could get them done today. You would feel great. You would feel less pressure. It makes more flexibility on Friday. But the distinction is that if you didn't get something done on the B list, it would be okay. You'd survive. You wouldn't wake up in a state of anxiety the next morning because this specific thing wasn't done. And the C column is the things that you're explicitly giving yourself permission not to work on that day. So basically, you're writing them down so that you don't forget them, but you're telling yourself that by putting it in the C column, I'm saying, I'm not working on this today. I really shouldn't work on this until other things that are more important are done. So that urgent need to deep clean the carpet, or the taking apart your dishwasher to make sure that the drain trap is clear, or the researching new types of pens for your bullet journal, are things that you want to do, but you know that they're not the most important. So the C column is really useful. This is my actual list for today. So as you see, in the A column, I have a mix of different tasks and projects. Some things, like showering, are just natural human things. Some things are for my community. Some things are for this webinar right here. But I normally, like I mentioned, do community prep for my community on Thursdays. But today, I knew that it was going to have to be, it would be nice to get to this today. If I don't get to it, it's not going to be the end of the world. I still have until Sunday night, basically, to finish it. So and then there are also things that I know that my brain wants to do, and I'm explicitly telling myself that it's not going to be today. I need a new microphone. I'm not doing that today. I do need to deep clean my carpets. I'm not doing that today. But by putting it in the C column, I know that it's going to be there. I've written it down. I won't forget it. So the other magic part about the ABC list is that as you start to check things off, you can kind of see where your attention's going during the day. So if I have something really scary in the A column, like email advisor or send in chapter draft, it's pretty likely that I've started my day doing things in the B column, dealing with my emails, checking in on my course, making sure that the PDFs are set up. And I know that if I look down at my to-do list at 11 a.m. and everything in the B column and a couple things in the C column have been crossed off, then it's a gentle reminder for me that I'm avoiding some of the really important stuff and I need to refocus. Sometimes I make explicit bargains with myself. If you do 2 things in the A column, you can pick something fun out of the C column to research. But being able to visualize, am I focusing on the most important things, the things with the most immediate consequences, or am I working on stuff that's important but not essential, is a really useful way to kind of gently keep yourself on track rather than surfacing from a haze of productive but not important tasks at 4 p.m. and then being like, oh wow, I really didn't get that chapter ready to send off. So It's not only useful for categorizing the priorities, it's useful for making sure that you're keeping on track in a more gentle way. So now you've got a list, you've got a system, you're sitting down, and your advisor really needs you to write something up for this grant that they're working on. Or a student has a mental health crisis and you kind of have to drop everything. Or, as happened to me this morning, a friend calls and says, hey, I really need you to do this favor, something's going on, can you come and work the yarn shop? Which is 100% what happened to me this morning at 7:30 a.m. So I had to say between 7:30 and 9, when I needed to be at the yarn shop, what things absolutely need to get finished right now, what things are on fire, what things can wait until after 3 p.m., what things can wait until tomorrow maybe. And then I had to be kind of honest. So how much energy do I have? What things do I need to start with first in case I run out of energy later? And then what things do I need to communicate to other people? Do I need to tell my partner that I'm not going to have time to go grocery shopping today and they need to leave early so that they can pick that chore up? Or do I need to call and say, I know we have this standing meeting. Is it okay if we move it a day? So what do you need to communicate? But thinking through these kind of important questions will help you adjust to the flexibility. And then you can always go back to your ABC list and say, okay, I only have an hour. I really need to start with some of these ABCs. I need to really make sure that I'm getting these most on fire things done. These are magic questions. I call them triage questions. If you've ever been in an emergency room, there's a process called triaging, where a nurse will go through all of the patients who come into the ER and say, who needs to be seen immediately, who needs to be seen in the next hour, who can be put into another department, who can make an appointment and come back later, who can see their regular doctor at home, who can go to urgent care. These are questions that you can use to kind of triage when your plans haven't gone to plan. So what would be the best thing to finish? What's going to make you feel the most accomplished? What's going to keep you on track with your advisor? What's going to get your students what they need? So what's going to be the best thing to finish? Or if I only have 2 hours instead of the 6 or 8 that I was planning on, what needs to come first? An important question that we don't always ask is, what if this situation doesn't resolve tomorrow or next week? So what if this cold that I'm feeling coming on, what if I don't feel better tomorrow? Does that change how I'm thinking about these tasks? What if I'm still sick next week? Heaven forbid. Does that change what things become important to me? What will make the me of next week less stressed to focus on? So sometimes you sit and look at your list and you know that it will make you next week less stressed to have started work on that chapter that's due. So thinking about what things are going to buy you more stress or less stress down the line. This question is really important if you deal with any kind of brain chemistry or illness or just general life condition that makes your focus something that's variable. What can you prioritize right now while you have good focusing conditions? For me, I start to know that my attention is focusing when I really need my palms, my 25-minute timers that I use, like it's a religion. So if I know and can start to feel my focus slipping away, I'll ask myself, okay, which one of these things do I need my 100% focus for? What can use 60% focus and what can use 40? And then, is there anything today, now that I know that I only have 2 hours, that I can give myself permission not to do today and move it to another column or another list? What things am I going to say to myself explicitly? If you don't get to this, it's going to be okay. Because that will help you reduce some of the guilt and that shame about not, quote unquote, finishing everything. So last but not least is having small chunks of time. So maybe the opposite has happened and a student was supposed to come and meet you at 2:15 and they canceled and now you have 45 minutes to yourself. Or maybe there's a thunderstorm or a snowstorm and you suddenly have a day. Or you're waiting to have your brakes replaced at the car mechanic and you thought it was going to be an hour, but it's actually going to be 4. I keep on my phone and actually in the to-do list app a tag of things that are called little things. And I will pull out my little things list when I have some unexpected time. Often these little things are things like make the dentist appointment that you've been putting off, or send that email to a mentor that you've been meaning to connect with, or update your LinkedIn. But having that list means that I make better choices when I'm sitting there, because otherwise my brain says, oh yay, 15 minutes for Instagram, or oh yay, 45 minutes for me to browse yarn. And that's not always the best choice. So thinking about what supplies you can keep with you. If you know there's a high likelihood that you're going to have some extra time, maybe you throw a book in your bag that you've been meaning to read so that you can make a better choice. Or maybe you download a couple extra PDFs so that even if you don't have internet access, there's some things to read on your computer. But keeping some things with you and readily accessible will make it easier to pick things that are going to move you forward when you have that kind of unexpected gift. Making it harder to procrastinate than it is to just do things. So right now there is a client in Thrive who has sort of some regular downtime during the day when they're running experiments. And they've been really frustrated because over the last couple of weeks, that downtime has started and they've gone immediately on Twitter and then have resurfaced and been like, oh, that was not the greatest use of my time. So they've been experimenting this week with opening up their computer and leaving it so that when they come back, it's open to the reading that they wanted to do, or it's open to the emails that they needed to deal with, or it's open to that syllabus that they're really trying to make progress on. And so rather than having to decide what's going to be going on, figure out where to start, open up those files, which is 3 chances for you to go on Twitter, it's already open. There's less friction into getting into the thing that they want to. Another thing that can be really helpful is this technique that I learned from Gretchen Rubin. It's called a power hour. But basically, you set aside an hour regularly in your schedule to just do all those little things. And you make it kind of a game. So you see how many things you can get through in an hour. Can you shop for that birthday present? Can you make that appointment? Can you send that email? Can you get through 6 things? Can you get through 8 things? And it feels really, really satisfying to cross 8 things off your list or 9 things off your list. So you might experiment with adding a power hour every other week or maybe every week, just to kind of clear through those backlogs of tasks that are never quite important enough to make it into the A column, but never need to get done nevertheless. Okay. As we're shutting down this webinar, I will share with you the second most powerful thing. If I think that if you're going to do one thing after watching this webinar, I would love to see you start with some sort of startup routine every day where you check in and purposefully choose what the most high priority things are to start with. But if you were going to do 2 things, I would love for you to experiment with shutdown routines. Most of us are used to the model, what I call like the Flintstones model, where you work and work and work in the factory of the mind, up until the closing bell, and then you run because work is done and who wants to spend another extra minute. But I would love to see you experiment with leaving 15 minutes, 30 minutes. It really depends on kind of what things are happening in your desk or in your work zone. But about 15 minutes to shut down on purpose. So it's a way to leave the space mentally and physically. I like to think about it as a love note that I send to the me that will be at my desk next. And so I ask myself, what would future me need to hit the ground running when they get back? So I close tabs that I know that I'm not going to use. I deal with any last emails that are kind of lingering and I know will cause me stress and make me want to work when I don't want to. I put any to-do list from that C column that I've been keeping on a Post-it note during my day into my master programs so that I don't forget it. I update my journal with any notes that I want to remember. And then, really important, I identify 1 or 2 tasks to start with the next time I'm working. So I put a little star by it, and I say, start with this. Some people make their to-do list for the next day during their shutdown routine, and that can be really helpful. Other people will make a done list and make a list where they write everything that they did do that day just to kind of give themselves credit. And another thing that can be really helpful is cleaning up. So maybe you organize your PDFs on your computer. Maybe you get things out of your downloads files so that they don't get lost. Maybe you clean up your desktop so it's not a total mess. Maybe you clean off your physical desk. Maybe you take those 6 coffee mugs. I'm not speaking to me, never. I only have 3 coffee mugs on my desk right now. Maybe you clean up all of your coffee mugs. But whatever you need to do to make it so that when you start work the next time, you can start it on purpose and with a sense that things are already in control. Because that feeling of a messy desk, whether it's kind of an emotional messy desk or an actual physical messy desk, can make it harder to start up. So ending in a place that makes it easier to start. Okay. So hopefully there were some useful things in here, but if you want more useful things, please stay on the email list or suggest that other friends join the list. I am starting to do a lot more things in the newsletter that I'm not doing in any other places, like publish book reviews or figure out or share new worksheets that I'm working on, or give free downloads, or do webinars, or do a course like this. So I'm really working hard to make those emails super valuable, all for free, never that you have to pay for. So that's a great way to stay connected. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at thrivephd.com or thrivephd. Keep your eyes peeled for a special email tomorrow about the registration for the community. The Thrive PhD community, really quickly, is a group of people. We work through some curriculum, which is basically your how to do grad school stuff. We talk about reading, we talk about mental health, we talk about writing, we talk about job searching, we talk about career prep and all kinds of stuff. But you also have a small group to help you do accountability. It's really powerful. We are graduating members all the time. We're getting people into jobs. It's really an exciting time to join in. I'm running writing groups this fall. Those are starting in the beginning of September. So it's weekly meetings where you can get feedback, you can meet with interdisciplinary stuff. I also have courses, and more of those are adding all the time. I do work with people one-on-one. If there's something that you really just want, like high-powered coaches, I have monthly packages, and then kind of upfront, you can use them whenever packages. I really want to stress that I do have free consultations to anyone who needs them, even if you've already had the one before. So I have a link, it's on my website. I also tweet it out all the time. But if you ever have questions, or you say, like, hey, I really want to know more about how to use a bullet journal, or do you think this is a good fit for me? Please don't hesitate to book those. I love staying connected with people, and I love offering that because not everybody can pay for writing groups or for coaching. And I totally understand that. And so I never want any of the things that I know to be completely inaccessible to people. So please know that those free consultations are for you. And now I'll open it up to any questions. So if anybody has any questions, you can throw it in the chat, or you can unmute, whatever's more comfortable for you. I would love any feedback, or if not, I did make it just under 40 minutes like I promised. So, woo, my bangs, I was stress moving them as I was talking. But if there are no questions, I'm also happy to take them on Twitter or over DM or any emails. I thank you guys all so much for joining me. And I hope that you have some useful strategies to take away to help you figure out what's the most important thing to do every day, and to give yourself credit for that incredibly hard work of being able to never quite finish everything on the to-do list. Maybe it's just that you give yourself credit for finishing everything on today's list. All right. Talk to you soon. See you later. Bye. You're welcome. Bye, bye, bye.